Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Jalen, and today I'm going into all the books that I would like to get to this fall, meaning as of today, August 19th, even though it's not really fall, but like I'm forcing it upon the present moment. You feel? So yeah, basically from now until like winter starts, I guess, I'm considering that fall because I'm choosing to relinquish the beast that is a Phoenix summer. Like, I'm over it. It is currently 95 degrees outside, but no, it's not. I'm in denial. It's not 95 degrees. It's a chill 65. You know what I mean? When you live in Arizona, you have to choose when fall starts, and I'm deciding that today it starts. So we're getting into it. So yeah, these are a list of books that are just on my upcoming TBR that I've been really eyeing, that out of all the ones that are on my shelves, I'm like, yeah, these ones sound the hottest, like the ones that are really speaking to me. So these are in no order, but let's just dive into it. I think I have like 25 or 26 books here. So let's do the damn thing. The first one I have is Beloved. Is it Beloved or Beloved? I feel like it's a really stupid question. I call it Beloved in my head, so I'm gonna call it Beloved here. I hope that's right, but it's Beloved by Toni Morrison. I have only read one book by Toni Morrison, and it was her nonfiction book called Playing in the Dark. And I think that book is an absolutely critical and essential read for anyone that reads literature. And I've collected a couple of her books, and I just haven't gotten to them yet, but Beloved I want to start with because my understanding is that it's her most like horror-leaning book, which sounds really interesting. I think it's about like a dead child that is a ghost, and it's about slavery. That's truly all I know, but I would love to read this along with the audiobook because I think Toni Morrison narrated all of her audiobooks, or most of them. So for like a Halloween style horror literary book, that's the one I'm going to start with. And that one, like, I'm pretty sure out of most of these, like that one I think I'm going to get to like in the next 2 weeks or something. So finally getting to her fiction, I'm very excited about it. Next up, I have The Long Answer by Anna Hoagland. She is an author, a debut author that's coming on my podcast this upcoming week. We're recording it and then it'll be out the next week. But I've been really excited about this debut. I actually picked it up around pub day and hadn't had her scheduled for the podcast, but then I got in touch with her, and so I'm so stoked to read it this weekend. What I know about this book is that it is sort of Rachel Cusk adjacent, and that it's a collection of conversations that the narrator, Anna, is having with a bunch of women about motherhood and pregnancy and miscarriage and reproductive choice and abortion. And so all these things are discussed through a collection of conversations Anna's having with them. So it sounds like Rachel Cusk on motherhood specifically, and it sounds really interesting to me. And when I was in law school, I took, I think, 2 classes, one family law and the other one about reproductive choice under the law, and that was my favorite class, hands down. I wrote an essay about surrogacy disputes and how a proposed framework for resolving them is probably the piece of writing that I'm the most proud of that I've ever written, like, in my life. And so all that to say, I'm so excited to chat with her this upcoming week, and I think it's one that I'm going to love. So full thoughts to come on that one soon. Next up, I have A Month in the Country by J.L. Carr. This is a book that I purchased recently because, let me just grab them. Purchased a few of these Penguin Modern Classic editions from Blackwell's. I think they're from the UK, these editions, or they're published in the UK. And I bought a couple, ones that really spoke to me because I love how they look. They all have like these really cool, sort of simple white, black, and blue. I hit decline, bitch. It's potential spam. I hate those calls. Anyways, very simple covers. I love this one. Nabokov's Laughter in the Dark. So hyped for this. I don't know if this is on my list, but I think this is another one that I really want to read because I hear that this is a direct influence on one of my favorite books this year, Vladimir by Julia May Jonas. And she recommended this book. James Baldwin, Another Country, gorgeous. And then Yukio Mishima, Forbidden Colors. Also stunning. So I bought these. These are all possibilities, but I mention A Month in the Country because it's very slim, and I saw a tweet that said it's like the perfect August novel. Again, I understand that that's summer, but I'm living in delusion. So this one will be coming soon. Also, my friend Alex at What Page Are You On? He threatened me if I don't like this book that there would be consequences. Just kidding, but he said, I'm gonna like this, or I better like it. I think it's very much just like a guy thinking about things while like working in a church or something. So like depressed man moving through a church. Sounds hot. Next up I have Paul by Daisy Lafarge. This book I just picked up on Tuesday. It was pub day. I love this cover, first of all, but this is a book that's been out in the UK for a while now, and my friend Hannah at the time, I think it was around when I was reading, or shortly after I was reading Acts of Desperation by Megan Nolan, which was in my top 15 fiction last year. She said that if I love that book, or just like general toxic relationship fiction that's been published of late, that I will love this one. So I don't know too much about it other than that, and that Hannah loved it, but I haven't read a tox relationship in a while, it seems like. So that one should be good. I'm excited. Okay, next I have The Last Samurai by Helen DeWitt. This is a book that's been eyeing me for over a year now. It is a book that many people on like book Twitter are frequently talking about being like underrated, and some of my favorite writers really love this book, namely Lauren Euler. It's one of her favorites. And it's just a long book that I've been really intrigued to read, that it plays with, I think, a child narrator and navigating like a mother-son relationship from the perspective of a child. It's done really well, and I think it's quite like innovative in form or something. So I don't know too much about it other than that it's like immensely praised by people that I really trust with reviews, and seems to be kind of like a hidden gem of recent fiction. I don't know when it was published. I think it was published like late 90s, early 2000s maybe, but that's that one. Okay, next up I have Identity by Mithu Sanyal, translated by Alta L. Price. This is a book that just came out recently, and it sounds right up my alley, and I'm hoping that it's going to be like my 2022 fake accounts experience. I'm hoping. But this one is about a well-known blogger and a doctoral student is in awe of her supervisor, a superstar post-colonial and race studies professor. But her life and sense of self are turned upside down when it emerges that this professor, who passed for Indian, is in fact white. Her praise for her beloved again, professor during a radio interview just hours before the news of the scandal breaks, and before she learns the truth, calls into question her own reputation as a young biracial activist. So it explores, I guess, internet culture and the current identity politics debates that are going on online, and it just sounds like it's really tapping into one, like the internet novel or social media discourse novel that I tend to really like, and also looking at, it's giving like Rachel Dolezal vibes, you know what I mean? So I'm really curious to see what this is going to entail. This is another debut, translated fiction, but also this cover, it's like definitely top 5, I want to say, of the year for me. It's so striking. Next I have The Bass Rock by Evie Wild. This book has been on my TBR for like 2.5 years. I understand it's about 3 women in 3 different time periods, and I think I'm blanking. I think one of them is like accused of being a witch. My understanding is that it's about male violence and thinking about in 3 different generations and 3 different women and how their stories connect, how that is explored here. But I hear it's quite dark and sort of gothic in its telling, I believe. So that one sounds perfect for a Halloween vibe. So I'm really looking for books that will fit this sort of literary horror space in my heart that is like my number one favorite thing to read, especially at this time of the year. So if you have any like literary horror recommendations, I feel like this year I haven't seen as many published. I think I have a couple coming up like in the list that I want to get to, but I feel like I'm a little dry on that front. So if you have any in that vein that you think I would like, please let me know, because I feel like this book is a little less Halloween-y than I would like it to be. Next up, I have an author who writes incredibly dark shit. It is Dennis Cooper in his book Frisk. This is one that I picked up recently when I was in Chicago. I went to this queer bookstore called Unabridged Bookstore, and they have like this section that's all queer writers, and they had an entire Dennis Cooper section, which was so fucking cool because recently I read The Sluts by him, and it really just blew my mind in terms of it being an internet novel and also shows how to use depravity in fiction that doesn't feel like it is purely just trying to shock the reader. It's really using this transgressive depiction of sexual violence throughout the book in a really, really interesting way that I can't stop thinking about that book since I finished it. I think about it like every day, forever haunted by it. But that's why I want to read some more Dennis Cooper this fall, because his books really go there and they're truly disturbing. And this one here is similarly immensely fucked up. So we'll see how I get through this one. It seems to be a bit slimmer than The Sluts, but we'll see. We'll see if it packs a similar punch. So next up I have Devil House by John Darnielle. This book came out earlier this year, I think. Or was it last year? I don't know. It was kind of sort of recent, but this book definitely fits like that literary horror vibe that I'm looking for Halloween reads. And my understanding is that this is a book about a true crime writer, I believe, who moves into a house where murders have been committed. But my understanding is that it's not true horror and that it's not really, I don't think, supernatural by any means. I think this one is sort of metafictional from what I've read about this book and really plays with the true crime genre and really kind of turning this fictional device on its head, is my understanding, and I love books that are metafictional or that sort of play with the structure and form of a novel. So I'm very curious to see how John Darnielle pieces that together here. So this is one that I'm so stoked for. I keep pushing it off for some reason, but I will get to it this fall. I'm very excited about it. Next up, as I mentioned earlier, Yukio Mishima. I think I'm going to start with Confessions of a Mask. I think that's his most popular book and one that I often see recommended for people getting into Mishima, but I want some gay pain. So for my gay pain novel, I think that is one that I'm definitely going to read this fall. I don't know too much about it, but I remember I was listening to Melissa Broder on her podcast. She had just read this book and she was like, yeah, this book is about a guy who is thinking about like samurais killing people, and he's like, that's so hot, like thinking about the masculinity of it all. I'm curious to see how that plays out. My understanding is that his books are quite depressing as well. So fits all categories that I enjoy. Hot, depressing, let's go. Gay, hell yeah. Dark, what else is new? Next up I have Ghost Wall by Sarah Moss. This is a book that is quite slim and I think will kind of fit that literary horror vein that I'm looking for. My understanding is that this book gradually reveals itself to be quite dark. Julia May Jonas, author of Vladimir, she also recommended this book, and so I'm very curious to see what this one is about too. I really liked her book Summer Water, and it has this sort of subtle, ominous feel in terms of its atmosphere and its nature writing that I really enjoyed, so I can totally see that one being one that's quite quick, like a single sitting read to get me into the Halloween or like fall spirit. So there's that one. Next, I've been talking about reading Cormac McCarthy for a while now. I have a couple of his books, and the one I think I'm going to start with, I had a few polls like on Instagram asking for feedback on where to start, and it seems like his most popular book and the one that is the most generally recommended is The Road. I was thinking about starting with Blood Meridian because I hear that that's his best book, but I also hear that it's quite violent and just like sort of singular in his books, where like you should maybe save it for like when you're ready to have like the best experience of his. So I don't know. I think The Road is similarly quite dark. I generally know the plot is about a father and son, post-apocalyptic. I know that messed up shit happens in this book. I know it's going to make me sad, but that's the goal. So yeah, I will finally read The Road, I think, for fall, or another McCarthy, but I really want to read one of his before his upcoming like dual novel release happens in October. I think it's like October 25th and December 6th. He has 2 novels coming out that are a pairing of sorts. So want to read some McCarthy before I check those out. Next, I have a short story collection that's been on my TBR since like 2019, I want to say. It's Exhalation by Ted Chiang. And whenever I see this book recommended anywhere, people say it's like one of the best short story collections they've ever read in their lives. It is sci-fi adjacent. I don't know what any of these stories are about off the top of my head, but I know he plays with sci-fi elements. I think he's the author of the book that was then turned into a movie called Arrival, starring Amy Adams, and I really liked that movie a couple years ago when I saw it. So this one's been chilling on my short story shelf, and I would like to finally get to it. And some sci-fi element, which is something that's outside of my comfort zone as well. So yeah, I'm excited for that. I love short stories, so that one I think is going to be a good one for me to check out for fall. Next up I have is Mother Dead by Vigdis Hjorth. I remember last time I talked about this book on my channel, I meant to look up the pronunciation of this author's name, and I have not, so I apologize. It is depicted here. This book, from what I recall, it said that it's a sort of psychological cat and mouse game between a mother and daughter, which sounds exactly like what I want to read in the fall. I love books about motherhood this year, it seems like, and thinking about sort of familial ties and how like the drama can play into horrific aspects as well. So I think this one is going to do it for me. And this is an author that I've been wanting to read for a while now. This is another author that I keep seeing like randomly recommended in circles that I follow like on Twitter and stuff. So I think that's one that I'm going to enjoy. Next up, I have Sheila Heti's How Should a Person Be? Sheila Heti is quickly becoming quite possibly my favorite writer, maybe. She's up there for sure. I read Motherhood by her and Pure Color by her over the last year, and both of those books completely were like just balms on my soul and like spoke to me so deeply that I was kind of scared of them, if that makes sense. I feel like Sheila Heti thinks very similarly to myself. A lot of questions about what we're doing on Earth. Very philosophical, I will say. How Should a Person Be? I have not read it yet, but it seems to be like her most philosophical book in that it's questioning personhood generally. Motherhood by her is also one that questions personhood, but it's more so rooted in this question of procreation and thinking about being a mother. This one seems to be a little bit more abstract in its telling, and I think it also plays with form. I think parts of the novel are told in like a play, so I'm curious to see her play with the form here, but I've been saving this because I know it's going to fuck me up like immensely. Next up, I have Mother Thing by Ainsley Hogarth. This book comes out, I think, in October, and this is another one that sounds like perfect for Halloween. This is like the most Halloween book I think that's on this list. Essentially, it follows a couple that I think is being haunted by the husband's deceased mom. So I think this one is sort of like comedic horror, and I'm very curious to see how this one plays out. But I love this cover, and it sounds excellent for Halloween time. So, okay, next up, I have just generally Iris Murdock. Right now, I'm like 60% of the way through A Severed Head by her, and this book is so fun. It is so good, and I haven't seen really anyone talk about it besides Rebecca from Rebecca Eats Books. She shared this like 10 months ago, and Iris Murdock is an author that I've been wanting to read for a while, and this one, I knew it was about infidelity, and that's all I really knew, and so I was like, let me try this Iris Murdock. It's kind of slimmer, and this book is like so what I want in fiction. It's so juicy. It is so much drama in this book. It's so fun to read. I think this book was published like in the 60s, but I feel like so many of like the hot girl TikTok people would love this book. I feel like anyone that loves like the love triangle dynamics of Sally Rooney or like Exciting Times, like any novel of late that's kind of having this sort of love triangle situation going on with the drama that people are eating up. I feel like this book does it, but like immensely better, I will say. This book really suspends realism and really leans into the comedy of the situation. So we follow this guy named Martin. He's cheating on his wife. He thinks he's like getting away with it. He feels like he needs to have this mistress. He wants to have like the best of both worlds. And then one day his wife tells him that she's been cheating on him, and that like devastates him. But then they all still are like cordial with each other and like friendly, but there's a lot of like power imbalances going on. People switch loyalties, and there's this one character in the book that is sort of like this demonic presence that's sort of like speaking through all of this. It's just so wild, and I don't know. Anyways, full thoughts to come. I haven't finished it yet. Anyways, this is not a wrap up, but all that to say, I am so excited by Iris Murdock, and I have two of her books. I have The Bell and The Sea, and I think my next one by her will be The Sea. That book won the Booker Prize, I think, in the 80s, I want to say. But Iris Murdock seems like an author that I'm going to be obsessed with, so I want to read more of her. So next up, I have Estetica by Ali Rowbottom, and this book sounds incredible and kind of horrific as well. So this one follows a former Instagram influencer. She's 35, and at 19 she was an Instagram influencer, and so now she works behind the cosmetic counter at a store peddling anti-aging products to women seeking physical and spiritual transformation. She too is seeking rebirth. She's about to undergo the high-risk elective surgery called Estetica, a procedure that will reverse all of her past plastic surgery procedures, returning her, she hopes, to a truer self, provided she survives the knife. But on the eve of the surgery, her traumatic past resurfaces when she is asked to participate in the public takedown of her former manager/boyfriend, who has rebranded himself as a paragon of woke masculinity in the post-Me Too world. With the hours ticking down to her surgery, she must confront the ugly truth about her experiences on and off the Instagram grid. Sign me the fuck up. Hell yeah. That sounds so good. I cannot wait to read this. I feel like it's going to be a romp, and that's what I like. A dark romp. Also, upset. There's a Carolyn Calloway blurb, which I'm screaming. Okay, that will be read. Okay, next up I have Eve Babbitts on my list. I think I have two books by her. I have Black Swan, that's the title, and the Slow Days Fast Company TikTok book. I think that's what it's called. Eve Babbitts seems like an author I'm going to like, I think. She is often cited and recommended by people that I trust as well, and I think she kind of leans into darker themes. And I like that she writes short stories as well, so I feel like I'm going to dig her, but I haven't tried her. I don't know much about her, but I see her everywhere, so I would like to try her. Okay, next up I have Exalted by Anna Dorn. I bought this on a whim based on the cover. From the blurb on here, it says, A depressed millennial astrologist, a self-hating lesbian with a rage and drinking problem, and profound questions of connection and destiny make Exalted an unforgettable read. It sounds like a pacey, depressed millennial fiction romp that will be fun. I think it'll be fun to see how she explores astrology here, something that I think is quite interesting in terms of how it provides people with structure for their lives and thinking about how people base their personalities around astrology is interesting. So I'm curious to see how she explores like astrology culture in this book, and the internet, so it sounds fun. Next up I have Harrow by Joy Williams, another book that's been on my TBR for too long, and recently I had Hernan Diaz on my podcast and he recommended this book, and so now I'm like, okay, I need to get to this. Joy Williams is an author that seems to be just highly lauded by many people that I have listened to or seen online, authors that I admire. Her books sound quite interesting and like something I'll like, kind of leaning into, at least this one, sort of cli-fi disaster fiction, also post-apocalyptic vibes. I don't really remember what the plot is per se, but I know it is like a post-apocalyptic novel that I guess has gorgeous like imagery and prose. I've seen some mixed things from friends of mine, but from writers that I follow, they seem to love this author and this book, so I'm curious to see where I'll land on it. Okay, next up I have Tell Me I'm Worthless by Alison Rumfitt. This is a book that I think I've had in like 3 TBR videos and I still haven't read, but since spooky season has come upon us now, this one I need to read it. I just have to. I must. Oh, so here's the cover of it. And I was recently at my local bottle shop, which has like really cool wine bottles, and I found this. Pairing, hey, going back to my roots of being online and pairing books and booze together in a bottle of wine that I would like to try. But yeah, I really want to read this one. I guess it's a haunted house novel. So yeah, it says it's a dark, unflinching haunted house novel that takes readers from the well of the literary Gothic up through Brighton's queer scene and out into the heart of modern day trans experience. I hear this book is incredibly bleak and dark. Sounds like the most fitting of like what I want to read right now. And also Eliza Clark, author of Boy Parts, has a blurb, and I just noticed this now. Julia Armfield, author of Our Wives Under the Sea, which I just read a couple days ago and loved, and was also quite bleak and sad and dark and spooky, and I loved it. But she says it holds a gruesome mirror up to the way it feels to live now. I absolutely tore through this book, so I would like to tear through it as well. Okay, next up I have Housekeeping by Marilyn Robinson. I want to read this one because Kayla Mayuri, author of Mother in the Dark, was recently on my podcast, and she was like, we followed each other for a while, and she told me that I would like this book, and I've been wanting to read Marilyn Robinson. I have her Gilead series that I have not read, classic me, but Housekeeping sounds really good too, so I'm either going to read Gilead or Housekeeping and see where I land on Marilyn Robinson. Okay, next up I have Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow by Gabrielle Zevin. This is currently quite the buzzy read on Bookstagram, on TikTok. I've been seeing this book everywhere, and I think it's either a friendship or love story that follows video game designers. Growing up and still presently, I'm a bit of a gamer, I would say. Not as much as I used to be because I usually read at night and I don't often play video games, but I still consider myself a gamer and like follow games and all of that. So I think blending like literary fiction with romance or friendship, I don't know if it's romance, with video game design, and I hear it's just a beautifully told story and people seem to be obsessed with this, and I also have the audiobook. I'm always kind of nervous about the buzzy books, but I think this is one that I'm going to take a risk on, and I think I'll like it. And this cover is so good. Like, I'm obsessed with it. I needed this book just for the cover alone, and I'm hoping the contents live up to the cover because that is one stunning cover. So next up I have Manhunt by Gretchen Felker Martin. So this one is a post-apocalyptic zombie-style novel in which there's a virus that has turned T-dominant bodies into brutal zombie-like monsters. And so here this one is quite bloody. I think it's a gore fest of a novel, but it explores 3 characters. After a brutal accident entwines the 3 of them, this found family of survivors must navigate murderous turfs, a sociopathic billionaire bunker brat, and awkward relationship dynamics, all while outrunning packs of feral men and their own demons. Yeah, it seems to be more like kind of like thriller adjacent or quite plotty compared to the other books that I have on this list, but I like to kind of dabble in sort of like pure genre horror fiction from time to time, and I think this is the one that I want to try out in that front. Finally, I really want to reread The Secret History by Donna Tartt. I know Anna Wallace Johnson and she made a video recently about like rereads and old favorites of hers, and she talked about reading this one, and I think I'm going to ask her after this, or I'm going to ask her through this video, Anna, do you want to buddy read that? Because that'd be fun. I always cite The Secret History as the book that really got me back into reading again, After I picked it up at Powell's, I was on the flight home and I was tearing through that shit. Like, I could not put it down. I loved the campus novel feel. I loved the not murder mystery, but
I like books with murder in them.
that book is quite distinctly fall in my opinion. So yeah, that's something else I want to check out again and see if I still love it or if my opinion has changed, which I don't think it will, but yeah, I'm curious to see. But that is my fall TBR. If you have any opinions on these books, if you have any recommendations based on these books, I would love to hear them. And I would also love to know what's on your fall TBR. Is there anything that you're looking forward to that's coming out soon? Books that have been on your TBR for too long? Let's talk about it in the comments. But yeah, I'll catch you all in the next one. Bye.